Commander Huck's coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago, but he hadn't moved from his station. The deep space monitoring array aboard the Council vessel Nexus Prime usually picked up routine cargo manifests, diplomatic chatter, and the occasional pirate transmission. Nothing like this. The signal from Cell 3 pulsed across his screens in waves of impossible complexity. Most species sent simple distress beacons: location, species identification, nature of emergency. This transmission was different. It was alive. "Nari, run this through the cultural analysis matrix again," Hugh said, his voice tight with concentration. Lieutenant Nari's fingers danced across her console, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was the best communications specialist in the sector, fluent in over 200 galactic languages and dialects. But this was testing even her abilities. "Commander, the base signal is in universal standard, but there's something else woven through it. Multiple layers of, I don't know how to describe it. Music, mathematics, emotional resonance patterns. It's like they're trying to transmit their entire culture in one message." Oh. The main speakers crackled to life, and a human voice filled the bridge. It was deep, steady, carrying an accent that somehow conveyed both authority and warmth. "Attention, galactic neighbors. We know our signals have reached your monitoring stations. We know you debate whether to respond to primitive species like us. This is Admiral Tae Jun-ho of the Human Defense Fleet, broadcasting from Earth, 3rd planet of the Sol System." Duke leaned forward, studying the audio analysis scrolling across his secondary screen. The human's heart rate was elevated but controlled. Stress indicators suggested extreme circumstances, but the voice remained steady. "We are not calling for rescue," Admiral Tae continued. "We are calling for witnesses. What is about to unfold in our system will change everything you think you know about strength, sacrifice, and what it means to be truly alive in this galaxy." Counselor Vara entered the bridge at that moment, her 6-foot insectoid frame clicking across the metal flooring. Her compound eyes reflected the light from the displays as she approached Huke's station. "Another backwater species screaming into the void," she said, her translator rendering her clicking mandibles into dismissive words. "Log it, file it, forget it. We have 17 legitimate distress calls from actual spacefaring civilizations, waiting for response." But Hugh couldn't tear his attention away from the transmission. Behind Admiral Tae's voice, he could hear something that made his skin crawl with anticipation: alarms, the distant sound of explosions, and underneath it all, music, actual music, as if the humans were broadcasting a symphony while under attack. Nari whispered, her voice filled with awe. "I'm detecting massive energy signatures in the Sol system. These aren't theoretical readings. There's a full-scale battle happening right now." The transmission continued, and Admiral Tae's voice grew more urgent. "We detected them coming 18 months ago, the Devourers. You know what they are? All lost worlds to them. You've all watched civilizations burn while calculating acceptable losses." Huke's blood went cold. The Devourers were the galaxy's nightmare, a mechanical plague that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but stripped metal and silence. No species had ever successfully resisted them. Most didn't even try. "Could have run," the human admiral continued. "Our long-range sensors gave us time to evacuate. 18 months to scatter our population across the galaxy, to become refugees among the stars. But we chose to stay. We chose to fight. We chose to show you something no species has ever shown before." Through the static, another voice could be heard in the background, a woman shouting tactical coordinates. Then a younger male voice, calm despite the chaos, reading off what sounded like scientific calculations. The humans weren't just fighting. They were analyzing, adapting, learning in real time. "By the 7 moons," Vara muttered, her dismissive attitude evaporating. "Are they actually engaging Devourer forces?" Nari's console lit up with incoming data streams. "Commander, they're transmitting everything. Battle telemetry, scientific analysis, cultural archives. It's like they're trying to download their entire civilization into our systems." The music swelled behind Admiral Tae's voice, not triumphant. War songs, but something hauntingly beautiful. A lullaby, perhaps, or a funeral dirge. Hugh realized with a chill that it might be both. "We are 23 billion humans on one small blue world," Admiral Tay said, and for the first time, his voice cracked slightly, "we have been spacefaring for less than a century. Our weapons are crude, our ships are fragile, and by every logical calculation, we should have been extinct 3 days ago." The transmission filled with the sound of massive explosions, close enough to distort the audio. When it cleared, Admiral Tay was still speaking. "But we're still here. And what we're about to show you will change how this galaxy thinks about courage, about sacrifice, and about what happens when a species decides that survival isn't enough. Sometimes you have to burn bright enough to light the way for everyone." Else Hugh found his hands shaking as he reached for his command console. Whatever was happening in the Sol system, it was bigger than first contact protocols or council regulations. "Prepare the observation fleet," he ordered, his voice carrying new authority. "All available ships. Emergency deployment." Sir Vara protested. "We don't have authorization for. Then we'll get it afterwards." Hugh cut her off. "Something tells me we're about to witness history. If these humans are really fighting the Devers... ... He paused, listening to the symphony of battle and beauty still streaming from his speakers. The galaxy needs to see this. The hyperspace jump ended with a violent shudder that threw Captain Wu against his command chair. Emergency lights bathed the bridge of the observation vessel's silent watcher in crimson as the crew struggled to process what lay before them. "Shields up. All power to defensive systems," Wu barked, his training kicking in even as his mind reeled from the sight outside. Earth hung in space like a sapphire caught in a spider's web of death. The devourer swarms stretched in all directions, thousands upon thousands of metallic shapes that moved with terrifying coordination. Each drone was the size of a small building, their black holes bristling with weapons that could slice through most. Starship armor like paper, Navigator Jin's face had gone pale as he stared at his tactical display. "Captain, I'm reading over. 12,000 Devourer units. This is the largest swarm ever recorded. How is there anything left down there?" whispered Tactical Officer Hannah, her voice barely audible over the bridge's humming systems. But there was something left. Streaks of light darted between the mechanical monsters, tiny sparks of defiance that somehow hadn't been extinguished. Human fighters, impossibly small against the vast enemy fleet, continued their desperate dance of survival. "Magnify Sector 7, Wu ordered, leaning forward in his chair. The main screen zoomed in on a cluster of human spacecraft. What he saw made no sense according to everything he knew about galactic warfare. The human ships looked like they'd been built in someone's garage, angular, crude, with visible weld marks and external fuel tanks. Compared to the sleek council vessels, or even basic devourer drones, they were primitive relics. Yet they moved with a grace that defied physics. A human fighter, trailing atmosphere from a massive hull breach, spun through a debris field that should have shredded it to pieces. The pilot somehow threaded between chunks of destroyed devourer drones, while simultaneously firing at 3 different targets. 2 enemy units exploded in brilliant flashes, while the third simply shut down, its system somehow disabled by the humans' crude weapons. "That's impossible," Hannah breathed. "Their targeting computers can't be that advanced. No species develops that kind of precision without centuries of space combat experience." "Maybe it's not the computers," said Communications Officer Yura, adjusting her headset. "Captain, I'm picking up chatter from the human pilots. You need to hear this." The bridge speakers crackled to life with rapid-fire human voices overlapping, in what sounded like chaos, but somehow maintained perfect coordination. "Hawk 2, you've got 3 bogeys on your 6. Break left in 3, ... 2. Mark, copy that, Thunder. Rabbit, I need you to draw fire from the big one while I line up this. Shot. Roger, Hawk Leader." "Hey, did anyone else notice these things? Have a weak spot just behind their primary weapon array?" confirmed Rabbit. "Passing tactical data to all units. Aim for the glowing bits, people." Captain Wu's military experience told him this shouldn't work. Combat communications were supposed to be formal, precise, following established protocols. This sounded more like friends playing a game than warriors fighting for their species' survival. Yet it was devastatingly effective. As the Council observers watched, the human fighters began adapting their tactics in real time. What had started as desperate hit-and-run attacks evolved into coordinated strikes that exploited weaknesses the Devourers didn't even know they had. Incoming transmission from the planet, Yura announced. Admiral Tay. The human admiral's voice filled the bridge, and despite the chaos of battle raging around Earth, he sounded almost conversational. Council observers, we see your ships holding position at the system's edge. Smart move. These things pack quite a punch. A massive explosion lit up the view screen as a Devourer heavy cruiser erupted in a chain reaction that took out a dozen smaller drones. Through the static, Admiral Tay continued speaking. Don't intervene. We know your protocols prohibit direct action until formal diplomatic contact is established. Besides, this is our fight. Our choice. But we want you to watch. The galaxy needs to see what humans can do when we stop worrying about impossible odds. Navigator Jin's console started beeping frantically. Captain, massive energy spike from Sector 4. On the screen, a human fighter was accelerating directly toward a cluster of Devourer drones. The ship's hull was breached in multiple places, atmosphere streaming behind it like a comet's tail. The pilot should have ejected, should have tried to escape. Instead, the fighter punched its engines to maximum power. This is Pilot Sung Min Jun. To all units, came a young voice over the communications channel. I'm down to 10% power, and my life support just failed. But I've got a full payload and a really bad attitude about uninvited guests. Fighter screamed toward the enemy formation, defensive fire lighting up space around it. Somehow, impossibly, the tiny human craft slipped through the deadly web of energy beams and projectiles. For Earth, Sung Min Shun's voice echoed across all frequencies as his ship slammed into the center of the Devourer cluster. The explosion was unlike anything Captain Wu had ever witnessed. Instead of a simple detonation, human fighters seemed to trigger a cascading failure that rippled through the entire enemy formation. 12 Devourer drones simply ceased to exist, their metallic shells torn apart by forces that shouldn't have been possible from such a small explosion. How? Hannah whispered, her tactical training struggling to process what she'd just seen. Over the communication channel, Admiral Tay's voice carried a mixture of pride and grief. Minjan figured out that their power cores resonate at a specific frequency. One properly placed explosion can create a feedback loop that takes out an entire formation. The Admiral paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was harder, filled with a determination that made Captain Wu's skin crawl with anticipation. We've been studying these things for 18 months, people. Every transmission they've sent, every tactic they've used against other worlds, we know them better than they know themselves. And we're going to use that knowledge to show the galaxy something it's never seen before. Through the view screen, more human fighters continued their impossible dance between the metallic predators, each pilot pushing their crude ships beyond all reasonable limits. They flew like the laws of physics were merely suggestions, like death was just another obstacle to overcome through sheer bloody-minded determination. Captain Wu gripped his command chair and realized he was witnessing something that would be remembered long after every council world had turned to dust. These humans weren't just fighting for survival, they were rewriting the rules of what survival meant. The third day of the siege dawned with Earth's sky painted the color of blood and fire. From the bridge of the Silent Watcher, Captain Wu watched human pilot Hanako streak through a maze of spinning debris that would have challenged even the most advanced Council navigation systems. Her fighter looked like it had been through a meat grinder. The left wing was completely gone, replaced by makeshift thrusters welded to the hull. Half her cockpit canopy was spider-webbed with cracks. An atmosphere leaked from at least 6 different breach points. By every logical measure, the ship shouldn't even be able to fly, yet there she was, dancing through the wreckage of destroyed Devourer drones, with movements so fluid they seemed choreographed. Devourer heavy cruiser, bearing 2-7 Mark IV, came her voice over the calm as if she were ordering coffee. "I see you, big guy. Let's see how you handle this." Her battered fighter suddenly inverted, diving beneath a chunk of twisted metal the size of a city block. The Devourer cruiser's weapon systems tracked her movement, filling space with deadly energy beams that turned debris into glowing vapor. Hannah's ship emerged from the cloud of destruction, somehow untouched, and fired a spread of missiles that looked like they'd been cobbled together from spare parts. The projectiles didn't even appear to damage the massive enemy vessel until they exploded inside its hull.
"How did she?" Science Officer Kira began, then stopped as her instruments registered the impossible. "Captain, those missiles somehow
phased through the cruiser's shields. That's not possible with human technology." The Devourer heavy cruiser shuddered, its lights flickering as internal explosions rippled through its structure. Emergency venting released clouds of metallic debris, and the massive ship began listing to one side. "Nice work, Hannah," came another voice. "Jay, incoming for cleanup duty." Pilot Jay Sung's fighter appeared from behind a drifting piece of hull, its engines glowing white-hot. His ship was in even worse condition than Hannah's, held together by what looked like magnetic clamps and prayer. But he flew it like a precision instrument, accelerating toward the disabled cruiser with mathematical precision. "Jay, no." Hannah's voice cracked over the "You've got 3 kids back home? They're going to have a home to come back to?" Jay replied, his voice steady. "I tell them their dad went out doing something that mattered." His fighter slammed into the cruiser's reactor section with the force of a miniature star going nova. The explosion lit up half the solar system, and when the light faded, both ships were gone, along with 16 smaller Devourer units that had been caught in the blast radius. From the Council observation deck, Science Officer Kira watched her instruments register readings that shouldn't exist. "They're not using conventional explosives," she whispered. "Somehow they've learned to trigger cascade failures in Devourer power systems. The energy release is exponentially greater than the input." Captain Wu nodded grimly. Over the past 3 days, he'd watched the humans evolve from desperate survivors to something resembling tactical geniuses. Every engagement taught them something new about their enemies, and they adapted faster than any species in recorded galactic history. But it wasn't just the space battle that defied explanation. Reports from the planet's surface told an even more incredible story. "Incoming transmission from General Mira," Communications Officer Yuha announced. The main screen flickered to life, showing a woman in her 50s wearing battle-damaged armor and carrying a weapon that looked like it had been assembled from Devourer parts. Behind her, the ruins of what had once been a major city stretched to the horizon. Council observers, General Mira said, pausing to duck as explosions lit up the sky behind her. "I hope you're recording this. We're about to show you something your military academies never taught." The camera view shifted to show human soldiers taking position among the rubble. Their equipment was a bizarre mixture of standard military gear and improvised weapons that seemed to incorporate captured Devourer technology. "Coming ground assault," someone called out. "It's the estimated 3,000 units, advancing from the east." "Copy that," General Mira replied. "All units, remember what we learned yesterday? These things have a collective processing delay of approximately 0.3 seconds. Use it." What followed was unlike any ground battle in galactic military history. The human soldiers didn't fight like any organized army. They moved like a school of fish, each individual unit making split-second decisions that somehow coordinated into a larger strategy. When Devourer ground units advanced in perfect formation, the humans scattered. When the mechanical forces tried to adapt to guerrilla tactics, the humans suddenly reformed into concentrated fire teams. When conventional weapons failed, they threw chunks of debris with pinpoint accuracy that somehow disabled enemy sensors. "Like they're playing a game," observed Tactical Officer Hannah from the Council ship. "But a game where the rules change every few minutes." Through it all, the human broadcasts continued. Not desperate pleas for help, but something far more precious. Earth's entire cultural heritage, streaming into space as if the planet itself was sharing its final thoughts with the galaxy. Poetry, by writers whose names would never be known beyond their solar system. Scientific discoveries that solve problems the Council had been working on for centuries. Music that somehow captured the essence of what it meant to be human in the face of extinction, giving us everything, Captain Wu realized. Every song, every story, every breakthrough their species ever achieved, they know they're not going to survive this. Admiral Tay's voice cut through the cultural transmission with crisp military precision. Council ships, we're uploading tactical data now. What we've learned about the Devourers. It changes everything. The data package that followed made Science Officer Kira's console light up like a festival display. Captain, this is incredible. They've identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in Devourer systems. Weaknesses that none of our military strategists ever discovered. As the information flowed through the Council ship's computers, it became clear that the humans had done something unprecedented. In just 3 days of combat, they'd reverse-engineered technology that had consumed dozens of worlds across the galaxy. Look at this, Kira said, highlighting a section of the tactical analysis. They've figured out how to turn the Devourers, own adaptive programming against them, create a feedback loop that makes them more vulnerable the longer they fight. Admiral Tay's voice carried a mixture of pride and exhaustion. We've been preparing for this moment since we detected them coming. Every simulation, every test, every sacrifice has led to this. We can't save ourselves, but we can save everyone. Else, the transmission paused as massive explosions lit up Earth's surface. When Admiral Tay spoke again, his voice was steady despite the chaos around him. We're transmitting everything we know. Every weakness, every tactical advantage, every trick we've learned. Don't let our species be forgotten, Council ships. Make sure the galaxy knows that when humanity faced extinction, we chose to burn bright enough to light the way for everyone else. Captain Wu stared at the stream of data flowing across his screens, each piece of information representing discoveries that could revolutionize galactic defense. The humans weren't just fighting for their lives anymore. They were fighting for the future of every species in the galaxy. The alarms aboard the Silent Watcher began screaming before anyone could see.
What was coming?
Every sensor on the Council observation fleet lit up with readings that shouldn't exist. Detecting a mass so large it bent the very fabric of space around it, then it appeared. The Devourer mothership dropped out of hyperspace like a nightmare. Made manifest a sphere of black metal larger than most moons. Its surface covered in weapons that could glass entire continents. The thing's presence alone caused gravitational anomalies that made nearby asteroids crumble into dust. Sweet mother of stars, Navigator Jin breathed, his face pale as he stared at the tactical display. It's 1,500 kilometers in diameter. The mass readings are off the charts. Captain Wu felt his heart sink as he processed what this meant. Planet Killer-class Devourer ships were legends, whispered about in the darkest corners of military briefings. Only 3 had ever been confirmed to exist, and each one had turned thriving worlds into lifeless rocks. No species has ever survived contact with one of those, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Even the Thracaria Empire's entire battle fleet couldn't scratch one. On the main screen, the human fleet looked impossibly fragile against the massive enemy vessel. Fewer than 100 ships remained from what had started as thousands. Their hulls scarred and patched from 3 days of non-stop combat. They should have been fleeing in terror. Instead, they were forming up in a perfect circle around their homeworld. What are they doing? Communications Officer Yura asked, her voice tight with confusion. That formation? It's like they're performing some kind of ritual. The human ships moved with eerie precision, each vessel taking its position in the ring around Earth. There was something ceremonial about their movements, as if they were following a choreography that had been practiced for generations. Admiral. Tay's voice cut through the tension on the Council bridge, and for the first time since the siege began, he sounded at peace. Council observers, you need to move to minimum safe distance. Jump to the edge of the system now. Sir, tactical. Officer Hannah called out, the humans are loading massive payloads into their ships. These aren't weapons. They look like mining charges, industrial explosives. Captain Wu felt ice form in his stomach as he realized what he was seeing. They're not planning to fight that thing. They're planning something else entirely. Human ships began their final descent toward Earth's surface, not in panic or retreat, but with the steady determination of soldiers marching to their deaths. Each vessel carried payloads that could level mountains, and they were heading for specific coordinates across the planet. Admiral Tay's transmission continued, his voice echoing across the vastness of space with the weight of absolute finality. What we're about to do, ... Tell the galaxy that when Earth faced extinction, we chose to burn bright enough to light the way for everyone else. From the planet's surface, General Mira's voice joined the transmission.
Oh, ground forces. This.
Is it final positions? It's been an honor serving with you all. Commander Huck watched from his command station as human ships dove through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. The payloads they carried weren't random. Each one was targeted at specific geological fault lines, tectonic weak points that had been mapped with surgical precision. They're going to crack their own planet, Science Officer Kira whispered, her instruments showing the incredible forces about to be unleashed. The seismic charges are positioned to destabilize the entire planetary core. The first explosions bloomed across Earth's surface like deadly flowers opening to the sun. Mountain ranges disappeared in balls of fire. Oceans boiled away in seconds. The planet itself began to shake as if it were coming apart at the seams. But that was just the beginning. Admiral Tay's voice crackled through the static. Transmitted from somewhere on the planet's surface as molten death raced toward his position. We detected the Devourers coming 3 years ago. Our deep space sensors gave us time to evacuate every human to the outer colonies. We could have scattered across the galaxy, become refugees among the stars. The chain reaction was building, each explosion triggering larger ones as the planet's core began to destabilize. Earth's surface cracked like an eggshell, revealing the hellish fires beneath. Instead, we chose to come home, Admiral Tay continued, his voice steady despite the approaching inferno. We chose to make our stand here not just for humanity, but for every species that will come after us. The math is simple. One world dies so that a galaxy might live. The Devourer mothership had begun to respond to the threat, its massive weapons. Systems charging up to glass the planet before the humans could complete their plan. But it was too late. Earth's core went critical. The explosion that followed defied description. The planet didn't just explode, it became a star for 17 seconds, releasing more energy than most suns produce in a year. The blast wave expanded outward at a significant fraction of light speed, catching the massive Devourer mothership before it could escape, the legendary planet killer. The nightmare that had consumed dozens of worlds simply ceased to exist. The expanding ball of nuclear fire swept through the entire Devourer fleet, turning metal into plasma and reducing the galaxy's greatest threat to scattered atoms. When the light faded and Captain Wu's eyes adjusted, there was nothing left where Earth had been. No planet, no Devourers, no trace that one of the galaxy's most beautiful worlds had ever existed. Except for the Council observation fleet, somehow still intact at the edge of the system. How are we still alive? Navigator Jin asked, checking his instruments in disbelief. Science Officer Kira's voice was filled with awe as she analyzed the sensor data. The humans calculated the exact position we needed to be in to survive the blast. The gravitational effects of the explosion created a pocket of stable space right here. They saved us. In the silence that followed, Admiral Tay's final words echoed through the bridge. Transmitted in the last seconds before Earth's destruction, remember us, not as the species that died, but as the one that chose to burn bright enough to show the galaxy what courage really means. The Devourer threat that had consumed worlds across the galaxy for generations was gone, ended by a species that had barely learned to reach the stars. The humans had given everything, their world, their lives, their future, to ensure that other species would have the chance to see tomorrow. In the space where Earth once orbited, only silence remained. But it was the silence of victory, purchased with the ultimate sacrifice. The galaxy was safe, and humanity had earned its place in the stars, not through conquest, but through the most profound act of courage ever witnessed among the worlds. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Representatives from over 300 worlds sat in perfect silence as Commander Huck walked to the central podium, carrying a data crystal that contained the final gift of an extinct species. 6 months had passed since Earth's sacrifice, and the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened in the Sol system. The Devourer threat that had terrorized civilizations for millennia had simply vanished overnight, ended by a species most council members had never heard of. "Honored counselors," Hugh began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. "What? I'm about to show you will change everything we thought we knew about courage, sacrifice, and what it truly means to be part of this galactic community." He activated the data crystal, and the air above the podium shimmered with holographic displays showing Earth in its final days. The blue-green world hung in space like a jewel, surrounded by the mechanical nightmares that had consumed so many other planets. The human distress call was never about seeking rescue, Hugh continued, watching as the council representatives leaned forward in their seats. It was an introduction, a gift, and a demonstration of what one species could accomplish when they chose to put the greater good above their own survival. Counselor Vara, the insectoid being who had initially dismissed the humans as primitive, clicked her mandibles nervously. "Commander, you're suggesting that these beings deliberately chose extinction? That makes no logical sense." "That's exactly what they did," Hugh replied, manipulating the holographic display to show human fighters weaving between Devourer drones with impossible skill. But it makes perfect sense once you understand what they discovered. The display shifted to show technical schematics that made the Council's military experts gasp in recognition. Every weakness in Devourer technology was laid bare, explained in detail that could only come from months of careful study. They had been preparing for this encounter for over 3 years, Hugh explained. Their deep space monitoring systems detected the Devourer approach long before any of our early warning networks. They had time to evacuate their entire population to colony worlds and other systems. A murmur ran through the chamber as the implications sank in. The humans could have survived, could have scattered across the galaxy, and preserved their species. Instead, Huck continued, they chose to recall every human from across known space back to Earth. 23 billion people, all returning home to face certain death. Why? Because they had discovered something that no other species had managed. In centuries of warfare, the holographic display showed Admiral Tay's calm face as he delivered his final transmission. His words echoed through the chamber with the weight of absolute conviction. "We are humans. We were here. We stood against the dark so that others might see the light." Counselor Zara, of the Centaurian Federation, raised one of her forearms. "You're saying they developed all of this anti-Devourer technology in just 3 years? Our best scientists have been studying captured Devourer fragments for generations without significant breakthroughs?" "That's the genius of human thinking," Hugh replied, activating another section of the data crystal. "They didn't try to match Devourer technology. They looked for ways to turn it against itself. Every weakness they found was something that had always been there, hidden in plain sight." The display showed human pilots using crude ships to exploit vulnerabilities that sophisticated council vessels had never noticed. Simple frequency modulations that could disable entire Devourer formations. Basic chemical reactions that could trigger cascade failures in their power systems. Their technology wasn't primitive, Hugh said, his voice growing stronger with each word. It was elegant, focused, designed specifically to fight an enemy they studied with an obsession that bordered on madness. From the back of the chamber, the deep voice of Ambassador Krell, representing the warrior clans of Vorthan, rumbled through the hall. "Show us the final battle sequence. Show us how they ended a threat that consumed my homeworld." The holographic display shifted to Earth's final moments. The council representatives watched in stunned silence as human ships dove toward their own planet's surface, carrying payloads that would crack the world apart. General Myra's voice crackled through the speakers as she coordinated the surface. Teams, all units, final positions. Remember, we're not just dying for Earth today. We're dying for every world that comes after. The explosion that followed lit up the chamber like a miniature sun. When the light faded, Earth was gone, taking with it the largest devourer fleet ever assembled. They turned their entire planet into a weapon, whispered Counselor Seva of the Andromedan reaches. The energy calculations alone, how did they know it would work? Because they tested it, Hugh replied, displaying another section of the human data files. Not on other planets, but in computer simulations that ran for months. They calculated every variable, every possible outcome. They knew exactly what would happen when they cracked their world's core. The chamber erupted in conversation as the full scope of humanity's sacrifice became clear. These weren't desperate survivors making a final stand. They were scientists, soldiers, and ordinary people who had spent years preparing for one perfect moment of defiance. The data they transmitted to us has already revolutionized our defensive capabilities, Hugh announced, his voice cutting through. The noise? 7 worlds have successfully repelled Devour Scout fleets using human tactical innovations. The threat that has plagued our galaxy for millennia is effectively neutralized. He paused, letting the significance of that statement sink in. But that's not their greatest gift to us, he continued. In their final hours, they transmitted their entire cultural heritage, music that speaks to the soul, regardless of species. Scientific methods that approach problems from angles we never considered. Stories of individual sacrifice that have inspired a renaissance of cooperation across the galaxy. The holographic display showed images from across council space, new artworks inspired by human creativity, research projects based on human scientific methods, diplomatic initiatives founded on the human concept of sacrifice for the greater good. The Devourer threat ended at Earth, Huck said, his voice now carrying the weight of prophecy, but something new began there as well. For the first time in galactic history, we have a truly unified defense network. Over 200 worlds have committed to sharing technology and resources based on the human example. As he spoke, the chamber's great dome opened to reveal the stars beyond. In the direction of the Sol system, a new light gleamed, artificial but beautiful, marking the location where Earth had once orbited. We have erected a monument in the space where their world once existed, Hugh announced. A sphere of crystallized starlight that can be seen from 50 light-years away. It bears one simple inscription requested by Admiral Tay in his final transmission. The words appeared in holographic letters above the podium, visible to every being in the chamber. Here stood humanity. They burned bright so the galaxy could shine. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the quiet sounds of beings from dozens of different worlds contemplating the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Finally, Counselor Vara spoke, her voice carrying a reverence that hadn't been there 6 months ago. They saved us all, strangers they had never met, species they had never encountered. They gave everything so that we might live. Yes, Hugh replied simply. That's what humans did. They showed us what it truly means to be part of something larger than ourselves. In the months that followed, the human legacy continued to grow. Their music played in concert halls across the galaxy. Their scientific methods revolutionized research in every field. Their philosophy of sacrifice for the greater good became the foundation of a new era of galactic cooperation. The Devourers were gone, ended by a species that had barely learned to reach the stars. But in their sacrifice, humanity had given the galaxy something far more precious than victory. They had given them hope, and the knowledge that even in the darkest moments someone would always be willing to burn bright enough to light the way. For others, the galaxy had learned what it meant to be human, and in doing so, had discovered what it meant to be truly alive. The end.